Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Carlos. And today I was going to do a tutorial on how to draw hands, and then eventually I was going to show you guys how to put those into Adobe Animate and then, use the frame picker and animate your hands and stuff. But I thought that would be a little boring, so I'm gonna do the very same thing, but instead of just sitting here drawing, we're gonna go on a wine tasting tour. Ready? Welcome back from that field trip. Now let's take a look at how to draw hands. I'm going to give you guys my approach on how I rough out hands, and then later we'll take a look at how to add your own style to this. So, like the doctors do, are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so when I go to draw hands, first thing I start out with is a square. Once you have that square, we're just gonna add a little triangle to this, right there. That's all we wanna do. We can either add another square or even another triangle, depending on the style that you're going for. So let's just add a triangle like this. Let's make a D shape, and then you can see the hand coming together. And then we're going to add some lines, and that's a basic hand. It doesn't matter whose hand you're trying to draw. If you look at it as a square and a couple triangles, or even a couple squares, that's what we're going to do. And then we split that up. So those are just roughs. What we're gonna do is pretend like we have someone standing there, right? And their arm comes down. You see how our technique, that technique is super simple. And one of the things as a beginning artist or an artist in general, what you wanna do is during your rough stage, you don't want to get too into the details. So whatever his hand is doing, maybe this guy is extending his hand. Here's a square, here's a triangle, there's another little triangle, and you don't even really need that triangle. You just need to add a thumb. The reason why I add that little triangle is because when you're looking at someone's hand, you can see the square, and then this little triangle here that jets out and feeds into the thumb. Again, depending on your style, there's some people that are comfortable having this style of hand. And you'll see a lot of this at cartoons. Like, I see it a lot on Nickelodeon cartoons. It's that style, the flatter style. And that's all you need, just that shape right there to communicate the fact that it's a hand, and we all buy into it. The reason I add that little bit of a triangle, I like to bump this out a little bit, just a little bit. So that's a really good, super fast way to draw a hand. So now let's take a look at how, if you adjust those preliminary shapes, how it can inform your style a little more. I'm gonna use Spa Studios movie, Klaus. I love their hands. I love the way they draw hands. So let's take a look. If I make a square and I just change the shape of the square, and again, I'm gonna throw in that little triangle there. I'm gonna make that a knuckle and bring that in. One of the things I noticed about the Klaus drawn hands is they have the knuckles in place, and then the fingers go from thin to fat, and then thin to fat again. Don't get wrapped up in details, just rough it out. We'll worry about the details later when we're trying to ink these. We're not gonna ink these in this video. The next video that I make, I'm gonna bring these sketches into Adobe Animate and create a graphic symbol, and I'm gonna use the frame picker and show you guys how I animate hands. Now that we have the back of the hand, let's take a look at the palm of the hand. It's very similar. The approach is very similar. We'll start with the same preliminary shape. We can even put these knuckles in place. Okay, so now that we have that, the difference between the back of the hand and the palm is the palm has way more detail, way more bumps and everything. What you'll see is animators will add a lot of these bumps, but they'll just draw in a couple lines. So they'll do this. So what I can do is come in here and curve that. Make it look a little more realistic. And then I have these fortune teller lines. I don't know what these are called, hand lines. These come in like this, and then like this, and like this. And then I'm just gonna bring that part down. So I'm just gonna curve that out. That was maybe a little too much. And if you want to add a little more detail, look at all these lines that we have. So that indicates a knuckle. So now that we've taken a look at the back of the hand and the inside of the hand, what I want to do is show you guys what I do with the fingers. The interesting thing that nature does, if you have a straight line on the other side, there's a curve. For example, if we were drawing a leg, if this is the hamstring, this is the thigh, and then this is the shin, and this is the calf. And you can add details in here. So if that's the knee there, you know, you have your ankle. If you take a look, the top of the finger is very straight. So let's draw a straight line. And then the bottom is a little bit more curved. So that's a really good finger. You can even add the little puffy parts. So now we understand how to draw the back of the hand and the inside of the hand. But what happens if we rotate the hand? Let's start playing around with different poses of the hand to see how we can get these shapes to do what we're asking it to do, or to convey the message that we're trying to convey. So if I have my hand sideways, I'm going to start with that square again. But if you look, that little triangle kind of isn't really there anymore. But if you, there we go. But you still kind of have that little meaty part sticking out. So we'll just throw that in there. But what we're gonna do is curve this just a little bit, because if we do like this, that's almost a robot hand. Human hands are, generally speaking, kind of curved. So we're gonna curve that square shape. We can add the little hump right there. And we can throw in a wrist real quick. And there we go. Again, super rough. We're gonna come in here and clean this up just a little bit eventually. But for now, we're just gonna work on sketches. When dealing with the hand, sure, we have the square and we'll just say another square on top, right? But what happens if we start to rotate it? Now we're starting to introduce perspective to our hands. So let's put down a square, and we're gonna add some perspective to it. So now we have a 3D cube, and I'm going to extend the cube and even break that line just a little bit. And then if we're drawing our hand with a thumb towards the back, when our hand gets in front of the thumb gets cut off. So let's go ahead and then add the thumb. This is where you can start to introduce some of your style. This part of the square here, we can curve it and even add some detail to the thumb. And if you look at the pinky has a lot of travel, right? Don't be stuck drawing hands like this. Look at how far someone's pinky can move, and then the ring finger. You know, your hand can fan out quite a bit. So feel free to just go crazy with some shapes. And again, this outside part of the palm, we can curve this out a little bit and then add that. Next, let's take this technique and see if we can draw a fist. A fist is a really big square, nice and wide square. A lot of times people like to put thumbs up on top. That's fine for some poses, but we're drawing a fist, and look at where my thumb comes in. So my thumb is hiding back here, and I'm just gonna draw this thumb shape. So now let's talk about if a hand is actually pointed at you, like the fingers are pointed directly at you. Beginning artists have a tendency to just go ahead and throw in some circles here, and that doesn't quite look right because our hands aren't hot dogs. Draw your square, draw a straight line, and then come down and around. We don't always see the entire part of the finger, so we can probably just get away with some U shapes. And as artists, we get a little bit of creative freedom. So if we have a hand like this, maybe one of the fingers starts to get a little longer, and we can just move it to the side, and then this other one you see how the U shapes deliver a little better message that these are fingers? This is a picture of our server who was nice enough to let me record her hands as she was opening a bottle. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit so we can take a look at the sketches. And we're going to draw right on top of it. So here we have our square. And because of perspective, here would be our other square. Here's our triangle and our thumb. And then obviously she has this wine key coming out of her hand. So even with that, we already see that we can add little details to it to really sell the fact that it's someone's hand. And you see how you can take pictures of hands and just trace over them just to get a good feel for what that hand position is supposed to look like. So if I were to cartoonize this, I would put a square there. The thumb comes in. We have to have the inside part. That finger comes in there. And the wrist is an interesting thing. I've seen wrists drawn a bunch of different ways. So if this is the palm of our hand, and this is the thumb, sometimes you see the wrist way over to the thumb side, and sometimes you see it way over to the blade of the hand. If I look at my hand, the wrist is a little closer to the blade of the hand, and I try to draw things in that way. My style, I don't have really big wrists while I'm drawing for some reason. I'm not 100% sure why, but that's just one of the things that happen while you're drawing and you're starting to find your style. The wrist just kind of happens wherever you want. But when trying to decide where to put the wrist, it really depends on where your hand is. So you see how if I'm holding my hand in a normal position, my wrist is closer to the blade and my thumb is way out here. But if I tilt my hand this way, it becomes a little more obvious. This is a straighter line. But if I hold my hand this way, like maybe I'm taking out the trash or something, you see how the wrist shifts over to kind of where the thumb is, and the line to the blade of the hand is not a straight line anymore. So it all really depends on the angle of your hand on your wrist, or even what your thumb is doing, because here the line is closer to the blade, but if I move my thumb in for some reason, now this is a straight line. That might make more sense. There you go. You see how this comes up and then pops out a little bit, whereas this is a little straighter. Let's draw that real quick. We're going to start with our square, and if we have our thumb out, we move our wrist over to the blade side. But if we have our thumb tucked in, and we're still going to have that little bit of a bump right there. Our thumb is tucked in, all of a sudden the wrist shifts over. See the difference? It all depends on what you're trying to convey. So now let's move over to the next drawing. This one is my friend Lisa holding a pen. If I was going to try to draw this hand position, there's a lot of 3D, a lot of perspective that's happening to it. So my go-to rule of thumb is figure out where the back of the hand is, because that is about as close to a square as you can possibly get, right? So the back of her hand is like this here. If we're drawing that cube in 3D, that's what it would look like. And then we can throw in some of these fingers. And again, this part here, it's a lot like when we were drawing the hand in this position, the U shape, where the thumb is attached to the hand. We're just gonna do 2 lines like that, and then draw the thumb, and then we'll toss in, here we go with the straight line and the curve, straight line and the curve, straight line and curve. So if we turn off the photo and we have our sketch, we turn this down. So now we can take a look and say, okay, here's a straight line and the curve, get that meaty part of the palm, straight line, curve, and a lot of times you can even add something like this just to show that there's a fold in there. And I forgot where her nail was. She's got this thing going on here. Again, our straight line curve action. Let's take a look at another picture. Here's yours truly drinking a glass of wine, and again, if I was going to draw this hand, this time I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to trace. What I see is I see a square, and then I see that the thumb is in front of the rest of my hand. Once that line disappears, it's insinuated, or we're showing that the thumb is attached to the hand. I'm going to take this line here and curve it out a little bit. And then that's the first part of the finger, second part, and then we're going to hit them with the curve right there. And again, we have fingers that are being hidden by other fingers. And then they just show up at the bottom here. And the same way I did here, I flared this out just to show that there's a knuckle there. What I'm going to do is flare this out to show that there's the blade of the hand, and again, this is super sloppy on purpose. I'm not trying to get too detailed. I'm just trying to deliver the information that a hand is holding something. These are interesting because the hands are in a very strange position. You don't always see hands in this position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where my square is, which is there. Here's our triangle. And with this one, here's the square. And here's the triangle. So if we're drawing this for a cartoon, we're starting with our square, our triangle, and then the thumb curves there and comes in here. What I do want to pay attention to is where the thumb and the pointer are, because they are dancing on the same surface. And you see what I did there? I made this a little extra, and it looks like it looks super tense to me. So what I'm gonna do is relax that a little bit, and then so here's a straight line, and I'm gonna hit them with the curve there. And then we have that the pinky hiding in the back. And what's interesting here is the blade of the hand comes down and it actually starts that finger. So I was off just a little bit. And that's why in sketch mode, just figure it out. This is not your last drawing. This is just the sketch. So sketching gives you the opportunity to just find all the shapes that you're trying to draw. And that's how I approach drawing hands. There was a couple of you that asked how I drew hands, or to make a tutorial about drawing hands. So I hope this helps. Like I said, I always try to figure out where this first square is, if there's any perspective to it, and then I always add the second square and then this triangle here that helps us figure out the position of the thumb. Don't take the sketching portion of this process too seriously. What should happen is you might have a bunch of layers drawing the same hand over and over again just to figure out where all the lines belong, and that's fine. So if we were in the animation process, the sketch would be the roughs, and then you go through cleanups, and then you go to final drawings, right? So we have to remember that even the professionals take their time to figure out where the lines go. And it's okay if your hands look horrible at first, as long as you keep working on it. Hands are hard. Hands and feet. Oh, feet. We haven't even begun to talk about feet. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and then draw a thumbs up. If you know anyone that's trying to learn how to draw hands, send this video on over their way. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm coming out with content every week, and I hope that you can join me. All right, that's it for me, everyone. I hope you had a good time. We'll see you next time.